is up, everyone? John here. Welcome to another video. Today we are reviewing and reacting to Marvel Studios' latest feature, The Eternals. So right out the gate, I will say, this movie is pretty good. Not necessarily my favorite Marvel movie, but not a bad entry to the MCU by any means. So if you're watching this video, I'm pretty sure you've watched a dozen other videos just like it, and you probably know a little bit about the Eternals anyway, but if you don't, basically the Eternals are these beings created by celestials, or basically big old cosmic space gods, to protect the Earth and a number of other planets. The movie was directed by Academy Award winner Chloe Zhao, and it stars Gemma Chan, Richard Madden, Kumail Nanjiani, Leah McHugh, Brian Tyree Henry, Lauren Ridloff, Barry Keoghan, Don Lee, Harish Patel, Kit Harington, Salma Hayek, Angelina Jolie, and Bill Skarsgård. So yeah, this movie boasts a huge cast filled with lots and lots of talent, and yeah, this movie is on an epic scale, unlike pretty much anything the MCU has done thus far. And yeah, I'm even including Infinity War and Endgame. Those are epic in their own rights, but this feels, just coming out of it, I kind of felt like this was Marvel's The Odyssey. I feel like it was meant to be this big sci-fi epic, and I think it does that very well. And one thing I think that separates it from the others is that this movie really has a mature feeling. That's something I really love about the movie. Yeah, it's overall designed to be this sort of like Odyssey type epic. Not necessarily story-wise. The story is not similar to the Odyssey, but it is kind of an epic adventure in the same vein. Speaking of the story, for me, the story doesn't always land, but I don't think that's necessarily any one particular reason. I just think this movie was trying to do a lot of things. But story or not, this movie is gorgeous to look at. The cinematography is just chef's kiss. Like, I got to give them their props. There's so many really beautiful, just like landscape shots, and just the VFX that they use to recreate so many of these historical landmarks and historical events, and the costuming is it's just gorgeous. And that's part of what I think separates it. Maybe it's because it was filmed in IMAX, but yeah, it feels much more different than the last couple MCU movies we got this year alone, which, don't get me wrong, Shang-Chi is still one of my favorite movies of the year, but it just has a more mature look, has a more mature feel than most of the MCU movies we've gotten thus far. Circling back to the story, there's a reason why movies like Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame work, even with their massive ensembles. And it's because those movies actually break their casts apart and sections them off into their own group, allowing each group to have adequate screen time. So there's that, plus all three of those examples, by the time we got to those movies, we had already known most of the characters and have followed them for years. Eternals had the tall task of introducing a big ensemble, diving into lore that spans thousands of years, and telling a complete and satisfying story. And I mean, that's a big ask of any movie, but that, kind of worked against it here. We got this super long movie that's just loaded with information. Now, there's a lot of interesting things this movie does as well, especially in terms of the theme, basically questioning your faith. All of the Eternals have to grapple with this idea of fighting with their faith, whether they feel like they're blindly following a leader of sorts, or they are kind of grappling with something that's going on internally. And it's really interesting. It's not something we see a lot of, at least done in this way throughout the MCU or superhero movies in general. So that was something I really appreciated. Now, this movie truly does some incredible things in terms of representation. The cast, as I listed before, is very diverse, and in more ways than just one. With Phastos, played by Brian Tyree Henry, we see an authentic portrayal of a same-sex relationship, as well as the first gay kiss in the MCU. And I really love that moment because it was tender, but very powerful. Just story-wise, it made sense. He's fighting for his family. And yeah, it wasn't missed on me. I very much appreciated this particular storyline and this particular moment in the movie. We also meet Makari, who is now one of my favorites, played by Lauren Ridloff. She's a speedster and the first deaf superhero in the MCU. Ridloff, who is deaf in real life, gets to shine in several scenes, some of which are very dialogue heavy, and I really appreciated that we could see a lot more of the sign language that she uses, but also her fellow Eternals also use with her. And the movie doesn't shy away from any of that, and it also makes note of how her other senses come into play when communicating or kicking ass and saving the world, such as like feeling the vibrations around her. It's just, yeah, it was really, really cool. Makari also gets one of my favorite action sequences of the movie. She was definitely a highlight for me. I mentioned it before, I'll say it again. The movie does boast a very impressive cast. They all get some pretty cool action set pieces together, but unfortunately they don't all get the same level of importance. And I know that's hard to do with 10 characters, and it's probably most likely due to the sheer scale of this movie. With so much to cover and just not enough time to dive into each character, some character beats just kind of get lost in the sauce, And listen, I can certainly appreciate what this movie does. Like I said, it's beautiful. It brings up some very existential themes and a lot of mature themes as well. But I think what brings the movie down just a notch is the sheer amount of exposition in it. This movie has to take so much time to explain because, again, for movie-going audiences who may not be familiar, I definitely wasn't familiar, there's a lot to grasp onto. And even though some of these things were sort of hinted at and touched on in other movies, this is the most we've ever seen of like celestials and definitely the first we've ever heard of the Eternals. So to just go right into it is a lot. And I think that ultimately does the movie a disservice. And the movie does do what it can. It tries to keep it flowing with lots of action and just beautiful visual effects, but unfortunately, the amount of information that you're required to retain throughout almost a 3-hour movie is kind of overwhelming at times. But yeah, we have some really, really awesome performances, particularly by Gemma Chan, Richard Madden, who I got to give a shout out to Kendra because she did indeed call that Richard Madden would be a bad guy. But yeah, Gemma Chan leads with, just this exuberance about her. I love Gemma Chan. Richard Madden brings a nice intensity to it. Kumail Nanjiani's great and everything. I touched on Brian Tyree Henry and Lauren Ridloff. They're some of my favorites. I want to give a shout out to Harish Patel, who is just a complete scene stealer in this movie. He is so good in it, and I just love that the internet is falling in love with him because he is just awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to see where we go with all of the Eternals, actually. They left off with a pretty open ending. One thing I didn't really like about the movie, so they introduced the Deviants, and that's basically the only time that the Eternals can get involved is that if Deviants are involved. But here's my thing: so much shit that is seemingly worse than the Deviants came to Earth and was like fucking shit up. Like Loki brought in a whole ass alien army and Thanos wiped out half of humanity. Like, y'all couldn't jump in there. I get that, deviants have to be involved, but like a weird little alien horse eagle thing doesn't seem quite as important when you have someone who's literally wiping out half the universe. That's just me. Also, speaking of deviants, remember when I said Bill Skarsgård was in this movie? Yeah, so he plays the deviant Crow, and it's that deviant who kind of sucks up their powers and starts to transform into a more humanoid figure. Could have been a cool storyline, about like discrimination and, being used and slaughtered, and could have been a cool storyline, but they didn't really do anything. They just kind of killed them at the end. Didn't realize that the character even had a name. I guess you'd really have to know the Eternals comics to know that, but it fizzled out at the final battle. And I mean, I can appreciate the moment they did give to Thena, but if you were going to do that, like why bring Bill Skarsgård into that? Anyway, that was just me. I didn't really care for that bit of the movie. All right, so that's the Eternals. Let's talk about those post-credit scenes. There were 2 of them. Let's just jump right in with the first one. Harry Styles in the MCU. Harry Styles as Eros, brother of Thanos, also known as Star Fox. What a wild reveal. You never know what to expect in these post-credit scenes. I don't think anyone was expecting fucking Harry Styles to be there. And listen, I'm not mad. I'm not mad at it in the slightest. I think he's a great fit for that character. And it was just such a shock. I remember sitting there, Kendra's sitting next to me, and she's just flipping the fuck out because, of course, it's Harry Styles. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like looking at the screen. I'm like, is that Harry Styles? Like, I was like, why the fuck would he be in this movie? And lo and behold, it was fucking Harry Styles in the Eternals movie. I'm very curious if they go anywhere else with these movies, which I assume they will. It made a ton of money. But I'm just very curious to see what comes of this, because that was just such an insane moment to sit through. But it was cool, and I'm excited to see. I love that Harry Styles is getting more into acting, and I'm just excited to see what projects he has coming down the pipe. But yeah, I'm still flabbergasted. My ghast has been flabbered indeed. Let's talk a little bit about that second post-credit scene. This one's a little more interesting, I would say, just because this one really does, in a very subtle way, show just how much. I mean, this whole movie shows, how vast the MCU is, but this particular is opening up a whole new side of the MCU, and it might be lost on a lot of people. Thankfully, it was confirmed over the weekend. So let me just kind of set the stage for you a little bit. Dane Whitman, who was played by Lord Commander Kit Harington, approaches the Ebony Blade, which we did hear name dropped earlier in the movie. And it's to presumably take up his alter ego from the comics, the Black Knight. He's then asked by an off-screen voice, "Are you sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman?" And I'll be the first to admit, I thought the voice sounded familiar, but I didn't have any fucking idea who it was, to be completely honest. But it turns out, and this was confirmed by director Chloe Zhao in an interview recently, that the off-screen voice belonged to the Daywalker himself, Blade, played by Mahershala Ali. Now that's fucking wild, because there was a leak earlier in the year. Now y'all know me, I fucking hate leaks, but this one was interesting. It was leaked on the Marvel India Twitter account, where they released a lineup of all the upcoming movies, and Blade was listed for an October 7th, 2022 release date. Now, I mean, that could have been a mistake. That could have been something an old graphic that maybe got mixed up and was posted. It was immediately taken down. But now knowing that Mahershala Ali had an off-screen cameo in this movie, I find it strange that they wouldn't bring him in within the next year. And who knows, maybe we won't see a Blade movie next year, but maybe Blade will pop up either in another post-credit scene, or maybe he'll pop up in Moon Knight or that Halloween special they're doing next year. There's a number of things they could do. But yeah, like now that we're introducing, they've name-dropped vampires in a couple different MCU projects, but now that we're officially getting into the vampire realm, I'm excited to see what happens. Especially when we got introduced to the Darkhold in WandaVision, it'll be interesting to see if they eventually bring Ghost Rider into the mix. And there's a lot to be excited about with the more dark supernatural side of the MCU. Yeah, it's very, very exciting. And also, I would just love to see more of Dane Whitman. Kit Harington was obviously a standout star from Game of Thrones. And of course, yeah, I mean, I think there was already so much happening in this fucking movie that there was just no way that they could really do anything with Dane Whitman in this movie. But I like that they did set up his introduction as the Black Knight. And I think it'll be really cool to see more of that. And who knows, we'll probably see more of him sooner than we think. Same thing with Blade, we could also see Dane Whitman pop up in some of these more supernatural stories, especially if he's teaming up with Blade in any capacity. So just some things to think about. So yeah, that was The Eternals. Those are just some of my thoughts and feelings on it. Like I said, overall, I did really enjoy the movie. There's just a lot of movie to enjoy, and sometimes I have to think a little harder about it than other times. But what I would really love to know is what you thought of the movie. So please drop your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, feel free to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Twitch. All right, see you next time.